In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Welcome to another special edition on Shift and Thrive as part of our Go-to-Market Spotlight series. If you're a CEO or business leader wondering how your go-to-market strategy needs to evolve right now to meet today's market realities, this episode is for you. And I can say you are in for quite a treat today with a very special guest I'm so excited to introduce to you. He's one of the most influential voices in modern B2B go-to-market strategy. He's built companies at the forefront of GTM innovation, from helping to pioneer account-based marketing as a co-founder of Terminus to leading marketing as the CMO of Pardot during critical growth stages for the organization. He is also an acclaimed best-selling author of Move, the 4-question go-to-market framework. And he's the creator of the Flip My Funnel movement, reshaping how companies think about their buyers, revenue alignment, and growth. Today, he leads a company that helps B2B and SaaS companies really think about how to invest in their go-to-market as a company-wide operating system. He is the co-founder and CEO of GTM Partners. Sangram Vajre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Natalie. Excited. And I know you've been at it for a while. Your experience at Forrester and all of those things make a lot of sense. And I think go-to-market is evolving as we think about it. I remember you talked about the book. That book was written in 2021. We sell more copies of it now than 21, which tells that go-to-market is just continue to be more and more important. But what's interesting is that I personally believe that having written the book, I've become a student of go-to-market. It has evolved so much. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I am as well. And I think you mentioned an important point, right? Go-to-market is evolving. It's getting more attention. I think, with that, one of the things that I've really noticed is depending on who you're talking to, go-to-market can mean very different things. And I was in a room with a client CEO and a number of other executives, and realized each was looking at it from a different vantage point. And so even aligning on what is go-to-market, I think is an important starting point. So would love to start there, kind of critical, but basic. How do you define go-to-market? And then would love to talk about, how you think CEOs and other executives should be thinking about it in today's market.
You got it. I think this year I've done about 18 keynotes. And every keynote, that is my favorite question to ask because it's so fun. It breaks the ice. It gets people thinking about it. And I would go around the room. I love to just jump in, just have conversations with people. So I would jump around and ask people questions, and I'll get 3 people, you get 5 different answers, right? Because you're just building upon each other. And that is a tough question. Also, before I answer that question is, of the 51 or 52, I think we had about 52 questions that we asked CEOs, executives, VCP, firm leaders as part of writing the book. 2 questions that were the most debated, Natalie, and the most contested were who owns go-to-market and how do you define go-to-market? So both of them are by far still today the most contested and debated questions in conversations that people have. So there's a bigger definition in the book, and I won't go through all of it, I can help people think through that and define it in 2 words. And it is, go-to-market is a transformational process. That's it. Everything else I can add, well, marketing, sales, and everybody needs to be aligned. Customer success and RevOps should be part of it. It is in the benefit of your customer. You should have frictionless experience. But ultimately, I think the biggest place where people get it wrong is they look at that as a project or a one-off site where you go and write something on whiteboard and that becomes your go-to-market, quote-unquote, plan or strategy. But it's not. And that is very important to understand, because once you start looking at go-to-market as a transformational process, what it demands of you is, okay, every time you're making a decision in go-to-market, it is going to transform your business one way or the other. And it's a process. It's not there's no finality in it. You have to go through and say, well, that tried, I launched that and that worked, but that didn't work. Every day, every organization makes, our research shows, about 20 to 30 go-to-market decisions. They just don't know that they're making go-to-market decisions. And we can go through examples of it, but at the core of it, it's a transformational process.
I love that definition, right? Simple and so impactful, and simple in its words, but then putting that into practice is far from that, right? Because there are so many moving pieces, and I like that you talked about it as an ongoing process. I think there's a lot of different implications as far as the approach that different companies take, that at the outset, they're not necessarily thinking about that. So I want to ask you, how do you see the process of figuring out a company's go-to-market in today's environment? If you were sitting in a room with a CEO, what would you tell them to start?
Well, first and foremost, the question will be, who owns go-to-market? And Natalie, I want to get your thoughts on it. You've been at Forrester. You obviously have been working with a lot of CEOs and not just doing interviews, but you practically are working with lots and lots of companies to help them. I wonder what you think about who owns go-to-market.
Yeah, I think it needs to come from the top. So the CEO ultimately needs to be the driver of that. And as I said, the implications of which approach you take and kind of how you go to market, I think has so many implications of how you structure an organization. But then I do think it really needs to be, sales, marketing, product, customer success, like all these pieces coming together.
Yeah.
So uh, tell me what you think about that.
It is true. It is the most contested question, right? One of the twos, and it is. You're absolutely right. The CEO has to own go-to-market, and when we sit in a room, like you mentioned, we do that several times through our advisory work. We have 70 plus certified partners who do that, and we teach the process of doing it. One of the things that we have learned in the process of sitting in a room with the CEO in the room is, first of all, if you're running a go-to-market, if the CEO, especially if you're in the early stage or less than 50, $100 million business, the CEO has to be in the room. There is no go-to-market process, ICP conversations, or what pricing, packaging, or what product positioning without the CEO in the room. I think a lot of people miss that. They don't have the CEO in the room. So that's number one. If the CEO, if you're listening to this and you're a CEO, or if you're someone who's helping, you got to make sure that the CEO recognizes that they truly, as Natalie said, owns go-to-market. And the first thing we ask typically as part of our process and advisory work is, what stage of the business are you in? And we help define that. We have an assessment, we have them do this, but practically speaking, it is, are you in a problem market fit? Are you in a product market fit? Or you're in a platform market fit? We call it the 3 Ps in the book. And the reason it's so important, Natalie, because if you don't know what stage of the business you're in and the executive team doesn't align on it, you are in for a big trouble. For example, we have done I would say over 10,000 companies that have gone through our assessment now. And not once, and in the rooms that I've been in, not once it has happened where everybody's on the same page. Not once. I wish I could say like, oh, that one company, no, not once. And at that moment, you realize that the problem is not figuring out your ICP or whatever. The problem is that at the highest level, as you said, you do not have the three most important things that you need in order to drive your business, which is clarity, alignment, and trust. Those things stay above every tactic, every strategy that you can build as a business. So if I'm in a room with an executive team, the CEO has to be part of it. And in order to build clarity, alignment, and trust, we all have to understand and agree on what stage of the business we are in and start making decisions from that perspective.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think a mistake I often see companies making is when they do, assign it to sales, assign it to marketing, and you're not getting that full picture. You're doing that organization a disservice. I really like what you're saying about thinking of the different stages, because it does need to look different. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of our listeners on the podcast are not all necessarily like early stage, but often are kind of newer at that full go-to-market motion, even if the
Yeah.
organization has been around for a while. don't necessarily have kind of all of that like alignment and like programmatic approach across marketing, sales, and then the other departments involved.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any stories that come to mind from organizations, either where you've worked or advised, of how they've transformed their go to market, maybe for one of
Yeah.
these type of scenarios.
Oh, I'll tell you a sad story about it, and then and also a heroic story around it. So sad story about it, and it's top of mind because and I posted about that a few weeks ago on LinkedIn. Was a CMO friend of mine. She posted on LinkedIn about 3 or 3.5 months ago, or 4 months ago. Like she said that, hey, she generated about 20 million pipeline, and she was writing about it on LinkedIn. Our team is kicking butt. We're doing incredible things. We're going to have a blockbuster year and all that, right? Which what you would expect, and this is about a, awesome startup company. And 2 weeks later, she DMs me and says, hey, I got laid off. And I'm like, well, wait, I just saw it. So I called her up like, hey, what's up? Well, what happened? She said, yeah, we generated this $20 million pipeline. And it so happens that that pipeline was for the wrong ICP. I'm like, wait, you're the CMO of the company. What do you mean wrong ICP? And she's like, well, we have 3 product lines. The ICP that was generating the highest amount of pipeline was for customers that were lower value customers, and they were churning much faster. And our goal is to actually focus on these other segments. I'm like, well, so how much of that 20 million pipeline was for that particular? She said almost 80% of it. I'm like, so 80% of your pipeline was for a wrong ICP. How did you not see the red flags with that? And then she's a very, very well, like she said, we just never had that conversation at the executive team. My executive team, my CEO literally said, hey, create pipeline. All pipeline is the same. And when we just didn't spend the time as an executive team on ICP, they just said, hey, it's your job. You figure it out. And that, Natalie, I don't know how many times that kind of story comes across and it's unfortunate, is that if you are an executive in the room, you have to understand ICP. It's not a marketing job or a sales job or a CS job. It is an executive job understanding what are your top segments. Not all pipeline is same. The pipeline from the segment that actually drives the highest retention is a better pipeline than a pipeline that's going to churn over a period of time, or experimental or a tested pipeline. All these questions are business questions. These are not marketing or sales questions. And I think I see that. So it was a very sad story. And she's back and she's now running some fractional work right now. And now she's so much more business focused. She's like, I'm not going to focus on campaigns. I'm not going to focus on events. And as the first thing I want to do, I'm going to actually ask business questions. So I say it quite often, is that every executive is a business leader. They happen to be in marketing or sales or CS for like 10, 20 years that make them really good at their craft. But ultimately, you're a business leader, so you have to take a step back from time to time to make those things. So one is just understanding the business, the economics, and what works and what doesn't, because some things could be shiny object or early success, but it's actually not true success. So that's just a sad story. I can pause and get your thoughts on it if you hear things like that all the time, or it's one off. But that was like that hurt me a little bit deeply, because I know the person, I know the company, and I'm like, it's none of them are bad. It's just you just missed something that is so obvious there.
Yeah, I think it makes me think of like the purview that different kind of functional owners are in, right? Marketing, if you're not looking enough from the business side, but you're doing a great job with what you were chartered to do, but then hadn't connected the dots, which I think is similar, on the sales side. Someone could be a tremendous sales leader, but might not be thinking about kind of the long-term viability of certain kind of paths to market or things like that. So I think it does go back to what we were talking about earlier of needing to start from the top of the organization, and the CEO needs to have that involvement. And then I know when we're working with clients and really trying to understand all of the business kind of drivers and levers, and including like you talked about the ICP, is
Yeah.
getting into the depth of the data and not just kind of what should be sold and to whom, but looking at profitability across the different segments and lifetime value, and really like digging in to all of the data that impacts the go to market in order to make those decisions. And then after you make those decisions, making sure everyone is kind of aligned and understands kind of all the different roles that need to come
Yeah.
together around that.
It's hard. This is hard work. I don't think that in 2026 people are going to be like, well, we kind of figured it out. Now AI is going to solve all my problems. Like I was literally this 2 weeks ago, Natalie. I was in a room where I said, dude, this is about 300 people, and asked the question like, well, how many of you guys are using AI? Everybody raising their hand, right? And then I asked, okay, how many of you are using AI for productivity? Everybody's raising their hand. And I'm like, okay, well, how many of you are productive? Nobody raised their hand. And I'm like, wait, like, doesn't that sound like a problem over here? Like we're using AI, everybody's trying to be productive, and nobody feels like productive. What's missing? The missing is we are so ingrained over the period of time. Somehow we are like programmed to start with projects, start with actually the last part of it. It's like, okay, I want to write copy, I want to create my LinkedIn post, or I want to do an event summary, or like all the things we are using AI for, which I think is very rudimentary in from where we are going to be in next 6, 12 months. And not a lot of folks starts with, what's my strategy? Where are we trying to go? And yes, these things might help me get better, but if I don't know where I'm trying to go, I would never prioritize. I would never be able to focus on the things that actually ends becoming the best result and best pipeline if I haven't spent enough time. So the hard work of 2026 for most executive teams is going to be sitting in a room or a virtual room consistently. And as an example of that, Henry Schucks, the CEO of Zoom Info, is a client of ours. I asked him like, how often? He's a publicly traded company, right? And I asked him like, how often do you meet as an executive team? Do you want to guess, Natalie? Like, how often do you think a CEO of a publicly traded company meets his executive team?
I would hope weekly, but at least, but I'm guessing that may not be the answer.
It's not the answer. I was shocked. He says daily. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I mean, you must have 100 things to do. Like, how do you meet daily and how your group? He's like, look, I want my executive team to know how I think. So when I meet with them every week, I'm actually talking real time what's going through my brain, and we're all discussing. And some days are more hard than the others. And slowly the meetings become less and less intense, and they become more and more conversational decision making. And we're slow. Almost every day you make a decision, as opposed to on a Friday you have to make a decision. By that time you get to Friday, people almost know 80-90% where they're going to land if there was a decision to be made, because they're talking every single day. So he meets with his executive team every day. And I said, when did you change it? I think he changed it like a year ago or something. And he's been a CEO for 10 years now. And he said, we used to do monthly, we used to do bi-weekly, we used to do weekly. And now he does once. So by the time, if I'm letting somebody go on the executive team, everybody knows he doesn't have to create a whole agenda and talk 8 meetings behind. No, everybody knows that, oh, we're meeting and seeing this person every day of the week. And after 2 months, if things are not clicking, that person won't be sitting there. Like something is going to change. So the transparency goes back to the 3 things that most teams crave for is clarity, alignment, and trust. Can we be clear about the bets we're taking? Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Is it clear? Is it aligned with what the CEO and why we're doing what we're doing? Are we aligned that if it works, great. If it doesn't work, we'll figure something out. But we align that everybody got each other's back for a period of time for that particular thing. And do we trust each other that everybody's going to do their best job in it? That is not an AI answer. That is literally psychology that is needed. So I was shocked by that, and that's why go-to-market is even more important now than ever before in the way we think about it.
Yeah, yeah, so true. I mean, I think those are like the ingredients and the foundations that you need at that executive level to then kind of push through like the different facets of the organization. And you talked about kind of ICP as one of the core foundational areas. I feel like I'm often talking about like the strategic and the operational foundations that an organization needs to have in place, and how much more important that is
Yeah.
in these days. And with kind of AI and automation, like you said, the temptation is to jump straight into kind of how do we drive efficiencies? What are the latest tactics? And I think foundations can sound very like the non-sexy side of the business, but I think they're more important than ever. And we talk often about right? Not just ICP, but then your positioning, your differentiation. What are your organization's unique assets at your disposal? So I'm curious, like, how do you think about that in your work? And are there kind of what are the core areas that you want to make sure an organization is kind of working through as they're
Yeah.
building this?
So we write a research note. It's called GTM Monday. About 175,000 leaders read it every Monday. Like CEOs, like I think we have pretty much have the most CEOs of B2B. We are focused very heavily on B2B, but across the board, manufacturing, supply chain, services, all that. And we invented about 3 years ago, after the book was written in 2021, Natalie, about 22, 23, as we were helping companies, we realized that they needed a more operating model of running this thing. So we created the GTM operating system in 2022. And that's where we have 10,000 plus people have gone through, over 70,000 companies have gone through the program and the process. And what's interesting about the operating system is it's only 8 questions. That's it. It's not. I wish in the process we'd come up with some brilliant thing that would. It's not. It's actually 8 questions, but 8 the most intentional question they can be. And I'll just give you an example of one or two of them. And if somebody wants to look, it's on Substack, GTM Monday. People can look it up. The first question is, where can you grow the most? That's the first question. If you think about it, it sounds very simpler, a simple question. But for the most history of go-to-market and business world, when growth at all cost was the thing, the question that we asked was, where can we grow? We didn't have the intentionality of the most in it. And that's one of the key questions. So we have surveyed and researched as a research firm so many companies, and we find that companies that have clarity on these 8 questions are the ones they end up becoming really, really huge. I've done that with Snowflake. I've done that with HubSpot, all of these companies, right? And what's interesting, they're not perfect. They don't have the right data all the time. They don't have the right mechanisms and all the stuff, but the clarity on these 8 questions is phenomenal. Every time I ask the CEOs, they just know, the executive team is just aligned on at that level. So that's my biggest ask of people. If you can do anything as part of your planning and everything, is get aligned on these 8 questions. And the reason the first question I'm using is a really interesting one. Where can you grow the most? The most really invites debate. That's what you really want. You want a healthy debate at it. What does that mean? What do you mean by the most? That's what the natural question will come. And you want that, not just where can we grow. So the most will say, well, in the case of that CMO I was talking to, she would have asked like, well, is that the people who would buy that product, do they stay longer? Should we grow the most because we have a higher gross margin on that one? Do we have a better NRR on that particular thing, or do we have enough people to sell in that particular segment in the marketplace? You will start debating all these questions. Do we have a point of view that positions and supports that kind of growth that we're talking about in that particular sector? Do we have customer success or any kind of process or system to support people when we grow the most in this particular area? Do we even have reps who can actually talk to that particular segment? So all these things that are actually the most worthy way of looking at it are not even debated in most time. People go at it, stumble around, and they jump around and like a ping pong from problem to product to platform because they haven't answered these 8 questions. And what we found in our research, Natalie, which was fascinating, was these 8 questions are the same, no matter what stage of the business you're in, problem, product, or platform, but the answers could be dramatically different. As an early stage founder, as you can imagine, where can you grow the most? Well, anywhere where there's a pulse and I just want new clients, right? Because you're trying to figure it out. So you don't need to be elaborate about that. You just need to answer that. As you become a product market fit, you would say, okay, well, we're doing really good in the health sector and healthcare, and we need to continue to grow in that, but let's try this. And now you're in the experimentation to move into platform. In a platform, you could say, whoa, 80% of our customers are in this particular segment with these integrations. So we know we need to be healthy and grow in that. And can we grow the most in that? Can we do more there? And now we need to really start adding because we are too concentrated in one area. We need to diversify and do other things. So now the answers are so different based on what stage of the business you're in, but the questions remain absolutely the same. And I think it's been one of the most fascinating revelations in the process of our research for the last 2 years.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I love the simplicity of the question, and then just how much complexity there is in
Yeah.
answering it. Like you said, healthy debate. Is it the audience? Is it the offering? Is it geographic? Is it where do you play strongest against competitors? And like facilitating that discussion at the kind of executive team level is what the teams need in order to all be rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, it is. I'm curious, Natalie, in your experience, when you talk to CEOs, do you see them inviting these healthy debates, or do you think that they're like trying to get to a decision and saying, marketing, you go do this, sales, you go do that?
So I would say I'm a bit biased in what I see because we aren't kind of the typical marketing firm where, okay, tell us, you need leads or you need help with a campaign and then go execute. We do
Yeah,
start at the same level that you're talking about of let's make sure we have the right strategy in place. And so it is CEOs that I think have an openness. Either they recognize they need to revisit their strategy, something they were doing before isn't working the same way, or looking to kind of accelerate growth or something like that. Or in some cases, kind of technical founder that is fantastic at what they do,
yeah,
but go to market is newer for them. And so I would say the openness to having these conversations and being open to thinking differently and exploring different directions, and let's look at the data and let's look at what are our competitors not doing where we might be able to focus.
yeah,
I would say there's a very healthy openness to it. And then when you see those and the first elements being put in place and some early kind of traction or positive response from the market, then the light bulbs really go off, and then it is kind of a cycle that continues to foster more and more of that inside the organization. But it's a new motion, I would say, for a lot of organizations and functions that maybe are not typically as exposed to it, right? Like HR might get involved in some ways, finance might get involved in different ways. So I do think you kind of it opens the eyes of some of the other executives that are not typically or historically as close to it. Hey, this is Natalie, your Shift and Thrive host. After chatting with lots of CEOs, one thing is crystal clear. Leveling up your company means having a killer go-to-market strategy. That's what my crew at Magnitude Consulting does every day. If you're trying to step up your marketing game, whether it's strategizing, accelerating your pipeline, expanding into new markets, or getting into AI and automation, let's talk. No pitch, no pressure, just good conversation. Visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com/Natalie to schedule a time. Can't wait to connect.
yeah. And you know what's interesting is you're talking to us, thinking about this as a CEO myself, and now, and as if you build a $7 million business now, doing advisory work and helping other people build their own business. One of the most fascinating things for me as part of I was a CMO for a number of years at Pardot, as you said earlier, with Salesforce, and then building Terminus. Then I still a CMO co-founder, and this will be my first fully going into the CEO for the last 5 years. And I think as I moved in from a functional role to a co-founder role to a CEO role, the biggest shift for me is just just like when I think about marketing, is that I wish I would have learned the business of marketing more than the marketing the business. I was so infatuated, if you will, with the idea of leads and campaigns and direct mail and SEO and pay per click and all of those things, that I was in love with marketing. And so understood I was just marketing the business in every area, in every way. And then as I gradually grew in my life and my career, and starting to think more on the operating side of it, I started to understand the business of marketing, the business of sales, the business of go to market at large. And the stark difference between people who do really, really well is that they're incredibly curious about the business of it. It's like, well, how does that work? Like, what works? And they're always asking questions and knowing questions to a point where you have to simplify it, you have to dumb it down, and that's when the clarity comes. That's when alignment comes. That's when, like, oh yeah, let's. So that those are the aha moments that have. So as a So my encouragement to everyone around when they start thinking about it is like, man, just learn the business, whatever industry you're in, whatever stage you're in. If you can understand the business, things are a lot more simpler when you start making decisions.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing you made me think of, if I can add on to that, is understanding the other functions that you work with most closely. Like, I think
Yeah.
in hindsight, in my own career, I started in marketing and have spent most of my time there. Starting my marketing consultancy 13 years ago was my first time really in a sales
Wow.
capacity. But that said, I had led sales enablement initiatives. I led a built in of a sales enablement department that didn't exist before, but I'd never been in sales. Like,
Yeah.
at the time, I was super excited and appreciative of the opportunity, but now as a leader of an organization, I wouldn't put someone in that kind of a role. Having these kind of rotations where, okay, spend 3 months in sales if you're a marketer and vice versa, I think
Yeah.
gives that kind of an appreciation that makes everyone better for it.
No doubt. It's like just a complete sidebar personal story here. My son is 15 and he plays tennis. He's out doing his tennis thing right now. And I'm like, dude, you got to get a job. You gotta go get a job because you can't. He's like, and he's virtual school because he does 4 hours, 5 hours of tennis. And I'm like, so there's nobody like Chick-fil-A, nobody would hire somebody for like inconsistently coming. They need somebody who can consistently come for 4 hours or 3 hours a day. Dude, I don't know. You just need to figure out a job. And so he's been like online trying to figure out what kind of online jobs he can do. And he just found this idea that, hey, you actually can call local businesses around where you are and ask them who don't have a website or and a virtual assistant to get bookings. You can call them, and now because it's so easy to build a website, it's easy to add a virtual assistant, like basic stuff, $10, $20 a month. You could actually charge $500 to them. So he and his friends for the last 2 weeks have been like literally cold calling, literally, and I can watch them cold calling and and then like getting shut down, a couple of times cursed at, and he's like, nobody gives money. I'm like, yeah, you understand that, like money doesn't grow on trees. And what's inspiring for me to just see that is that he has probably made that he and his group has made about 100 calls in the last 2 weeks. And they are constantly pivoting. I can see them. They started talking about websites. They're like, well, they don't care if the restaurants don't even care about websites anymore. They care about they're all on these affiliate places. So that's how they get business, not from Google as such. We need to just sell virtual assistant. Then they look at, well, they don't even understand virtual assistant. It's too cryptic for business owners. They're busy, so they're using different words now. Instead of saying AI assistant, they're saying that, hey, would you like to make sure that anytime so they're dumbing it down, their sales pitch, as opposed to a virtual AI assistant, like just the business owner at a restaurant who's just trying to keep the lights on. He or she is thinking like, I don't want anything that I don't understand, right? And then they're trying to figure out the pricing and offering. And they're like, well, should we do this free? And I'm thinking they're literally going through product, platform like phases as we speak and every day. And it's so fun to watch that experience. And the reason I brought that all up is because I think there is a huge advantage on experimentation that we don't really do. We have to experiment. We have to be the ones. As you were talking about, like, well, try to be and understand other roles. Actually, I would maybe take it one step further and like do other roles. Be an SB. If you're a marketer, become an SDR for a day and start picking up the phone and get some empathy around how it is. And you will learn very quickly that the pitch, whatever you created that sounds fancy, actually doesn't work. Because when you're on a cold call and the person doesn't understand what you're talking about, your fancy marketing spiel is not going to work. You have to dumb it down. So stuff that is absolutely 2026, I feel more people will need to become more raw and simple and clear and actually do the work as opposed to coming up with a beautiful slide deck with all those things to really understand what works, what doesn't.
Right, right. I love that story. I think everyone has the tools right now to make things sound good and to
Yeah.
quickly kind of make those kind of tweaks, but sound very polished and professional and all of that. What I love about your story is, the interaction is what
Yeah.
actually drives the impact and the improvements, right? You
Yes.
learn, are you tweaking the language, the pricing, the targeting, and the fact that a teenager is learning that lesson means all the rest of us can definitely embody that.
Yeah, I told him, like, dude, if you can take the hit for 100 calls now, you're gonna be just fine. You don't need to worry about anything in life. Because if you can take rejection well, and he's like, why did that person curse me out? And he's 15, and it hurts me. But it's also like, yeah, it's just real life. Yeah, you're annoying to them. Like, why am I annoying? 'Cause I don't think you're doing how long are you talking? He's like, well, I'm telling everything about us and what we're doing. I'm like, well, did you ask them what do they want? What will create the business? So now we're shortening the amount of time he speaks to the time he's asking question, but not just generic. Like, hey, tell me more about your business. Like, not that saying that, hey, well, if I can add two more appointments every day, will that change? Like, he's learning to add elements that will get that conversation that creates that. Okay, well, what are you talking about again? And then that's a good. If somebody says that, now you got a call.
Yes. I love that story. I was in my son a couple years ago. So he's in sixth grade now. He was in fourth grade, and I did. It was like a parent, career day. And I said, "What am
Yeah,
I going to teach fourth graders about B2B marketing consulting, and how do I
yeah,
make it interesting for them?" And I actually took them through an exercise of kind of here's a product. Let's think about kind of the audience, the
yeah.
messaging, and I was so impressed with even what 9-year-olds could do.
Yeah.
We definitely need more of that in the world
Yeah, and
ahead.
they don't have jargons, like, they would just say it as is, and I think we all need to learn from that. So when I look at and as a exercise that we have our clients sometimes do is we will literally pull up their website and 3 of their clients' website or competitors' website, and if they all say the same thing, I'm like, "You've already lost the plot." Like, it's that's like at the highest level, there is nothing that is everybody's saying faster revenue. I'm like, "Well, who else once is there a website that says slower revenue? Like, we will get you less leads and less volume and less sales and less capacity. And they all the words don't mean anything. So what does it mean? And then sometimes because I've been on G2 board and I know the back end and all of it, I'm like, let's go and look at your reviews. And we'll look at that's a real sentence somebody wrote and said. Why don't you use that sentence? Well, it's not proper. Like perfect, like doesn't really matter that he or she is speaking and it's said 8 different times in your 100 reviews. That phrasing is coming. So don't polish it. Actually use the same exact phrasing the way your client actually, the people who love your product say. So we have to, in many ways, Natalie, I wonder, we have to humble ourselves to realize that we probably don't have the best answers. We probably don't even have the best words. If you are blessed enough to have clients and customers, your clients are going to tell you exactly what works and why they hired you and whatnot. We just need to go back into stop being in the box of Zoom where we're telling and having internal meetings. It's like one of the best things that I feel like I got to do, and I learned that from Scott Dorsey, who was the CEO of Exact Target when they acquired Pardot, and then Exact Target got acquired by Salesforce. So that's how I got into Salesforce ecosystem. And he said his head of product and him, they committed in their what they call V2MOM, their OKRs, the way they looked at metrics, that they will talk to a customer every single day. They would never not talk to a customer even a day when they're working. Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4 times. So the head of product promised that I would talk to a customer every single day. He said, and it came about because he asked, like, what made you so successful? And we were just going through all that conversation. He's like, every day. Our product was never too far or too little. Our messaging was never too far or too little. It was you're talking every single day. That was part of every single executive's role. It not to your team. You talk to a customer, a real customer, every single day. This is a game changer for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's the way to make sure that what you're putting out there resonates. You're getting away from that buzzword bingo and
Yeah.
right, all of that. I want to talk a little bit more about what's changing in go to market right now. And while we're on the customer, an area that I feel I'm beating the drumbeat, but not always I don't know, not always breaking through is what's changing with the buyers and how they want to buy and all of that. So wanted to hear like how are you thinking and talking about that?
Well, buyers are still buying the same thing. I think it's not changing. They want faster, cheaper, better. Whatever version of whatever you're selling. So I think to simplify it, it's still exactly the same. But we are in a really interesting place where we are almost everyone has probably 80 tools that they're testing and playing around with, and therefore it creates this arbitrary, not truthful version of the future for these 80 companies that people may be trying, that they're all going to be successful. And in reality, only one or two of them are going to be successful. The rest 78 are going to fail because people are going to test it and they will go somewhere else. Um, Great example of that is Superhuman. I use the Superhuman email. They got acquired by Grammarly, and now Grammarly actually renamed their company to Superhuman. Really interesting. The company you acquired, you actually turn the name of the acquired company's name as the main company name. And I'd look at that. I was listening to their press release and all the details, and I think what's changing go to market is really how do you position yourself in your clients and your customers' mind is going to be incredibly, incredibly important. If you do not make them in the client's minds that you're better, faster, or cheaper version of whatever they're trying to get to, is just not going to work. So I would actually focus on not what's changing, but what is unchangeable. And that's a much shorter list. It's really a list of three, because the changing world is drowning us. It's actually making us paralyzed for decision making. It's making us overworked, and we always feel behind. But if you think about better, faster, cheaper, I think it would be phenomenal. An example of that one, Natalie, I remember an interview that I didn't do it, but I heard that interview. I was very close when that interview was happening with Simon Sinek, who wrote the Why book, right? And he spoke the same year at the Microsoft conference, and this is before Microsoft actually became cool again. But he spoke at the Microsoft conference, and then he spoke at the Apple conference. And at the Microsoft conference, when he was with their executive team, they were asking, well, you're speaking at Apple. What are they doing? What's changed? What's different? They're asking that question all the time. Like, what is Apple doing? And then when he goes to the Apple conference and the executives that they were in, they never asked about Microsoft. And then Simon being Simon, he's like, hey, do you know what Microsoft is building? Their actually tooling is actually much better than yours and the way it's all. And they're like, oh, I'm sure it is. And they moved on. They never focused on the competitor. And he's like, well, why didn't you ask me more questions? And they said, well, because we're building for the customer. We know for a given time, they may have a few more features and we may have less and we may have a few more. That we're playing the long game in this whole thing. So if we all can in go to market, we can go through very specific pricing packaging tactics to AI usage tactics to all of these things. Ultimately, I think if you can play the long game in it, I think that's the winner. And nobody's talking as much as I can see about that. Everybody's talking about a new tool that can solve all world's hunger. And then when I go in a room and ask questions, how many of you are productive? Nobody raises their hand, which tells me that we are focused on the wrong things. Go back to what's unchangeable. How can you provide incredible value to your customers by making it better, faster, or cheaper? Those three things have never changed from the beginning of time that we can know go to market.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to anchor around. And I'm curious to ask you for the things that, some of the things that will not change. What are the things that you do believe will look very different a few years from now in,
Yeah.
the market than where they are today?
Yeah, I think some of it, and I'm curious your thoughts because you're in it as well. I imagine that instead of the software rise that we have seen, we wrote a research on this. Instead of the rise of software as a service, I think the flip is going to be rise of services as a software. People are going to say, give me the outcome. I don't care what tool you use because there are too many tools. I'm not trying to be an expert at tools. I'm trying to be expert at my business. So the rise of services as a software, where the software is on the back end, not the front end, we believe is where the future is moving. There's just too much. The product by itself is no longer the moat. That's the like the top research item we found out, because everybody and anybody can build a product tomorrow. Even if you have the best product today, tomorrow somebody can white code it and copy the whole thing and build that product. So if product is no longer your moat, then it has to be a go-to-market, better, faster, cheaper. Like that has to be a version of it. The number three part of the really interesting research around go-to-market showed us that people are there is a very near term, there is going to be a future where we all will be laughing about username and passwords, that you have to log in into 20 different systems to do what you need to do. Every company is going to have their own ChatGPT LLM version of it. But at 2 a.m. in the morning, if the CEO is waking up and saying, I wonder what our pipeline looks like in London right now, he or she will be able to do that without logging into a CRM or a marketing automation or emailing unknowingly to another sales leader. And because AI doesn't have emotions, AI doesn't really have all of these versions of like departments and all that stuff. It's just gonna help you figure out whatever the answer is over there. So those are like some of the top things and changes that we see in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I think that like the interface for the user that you're talking about, right? Like all the data, all the software sits there behind the scenes. I think for all of us using these kinds of like the current tool set, you can already see what's possible. And so like filling that gap from what we don't have today, like just a very simple example, right? I'm in ChatGPT, have it connected to our HubSpot. The ability to like chat to ask questions instead of having to go in and build reports and click around the tool is great, but the functionality is still so limited compared
Yeah.
to where I believe it will be in, a year or two ahead. And so companies right now getting kind of their data capture right, their data strategy right, so that you're fueling the possibility for all of these
Yeah.
areas.
I really do believe, I wonder what you think about this, Natalie, but I think we're in the stone age of AI and what's possible. So we're all just happy campers doing little bitty things and still know that there are all these loose ends all over the place. 6 months, a year from now, if you do this recording again, oh my gosh, the world is going to be so much more different. And we're like, remember we talked about that and what's possible now.
Yeah, completely agree. Sangram, I know I don't have too much time left. I would love to hear maybe a bit about you from the personal side with the time we have left and knowing the amazing career you built for yourself. Would love to hear, like, who were you as a child? Were there any kind of moments or stories that gave you kind of were indicative of, where your career would head?
Probably not. Probably not a whole lot. Well, all I could think about it, we lived in a joint family, so we had like 20 people around all the time, and I was the youngest of all the kids. So I was the fifth, and as a result of that, I think I do wonder. Maybe it is because if you're fifth in the family, I don't know if you have any experience of that, but like if you're fifth and the last in the family, you're always trying to be heard. You're always trying to get attention and figure out and you're always learning a little bit faster than anybody else have learned in that age range because you got four other people telling you all kinds of stuff and you have to kind of do it. So I remember very early on that one of the most important thing that I was starting to do was just trying to try something different than all my four brothers and sisters did. So if they were in sports, I did not go in sports. If they were good at academics, I sucked at academics. If they were, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to have my own path because I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like, every time I'd go, there was, oh, you're so and so brother. Like this, I lived in a small town. Everybody knew. If they were in theater, I'm not doing theater, right? So ended up being a Boy Scouts version of it, which really made me outdoors kind of person, which really helped me think about how to think about just different things. And I was always I was trying to be around other people a lot more than my own family as such, because I was like, man, what if all these brothers, they're going to just beat me up. So that allowed me to really think about community and be part of community. And that's why I flipped my phone and all. I think about all those communities that I got to build or be part of. It just became a natural way. Anywhere and everything I would do, I'll always build a community around it.
That's really interesting to hear, and I do hear kind of making sure your voice is heard, the differentiation, and then
Yes.
as you were just talking about the community.
Yeah.
I think my last question for you for today is really like, where do you invest in your own personal growth and development? Like, how do you stay sharp and current? Like, where do you go for information?
Yeah.
Love to hear.
Yeah. I mean, just I wrote about a few days ago. I have these four quadrants. I do this with my family as well. I don't know if it's here. I actually shared that with a couple of folks, and it's really this. I have you can see it. I'll just read it out in 2026. It's four quadrants of how I've learned, and this is since last 4 years or so. Spiritual, family, personal, and business. And there's a reason for the order too. And I do this. My wife and my kids do this. All four of us do it. We're actually about to this weekend about to do our 2026 together. And like from faith perspective, just focusing and making sure that my faith is in Christ and how I think about that is so important and everything around it. So I start my day from that perspective, and then come back to family. Like there are a couple of things I'm just making sure I do it on a very regular basis. As a personal growth perspective, I'm probably every month I'm in at least one book club with friends of mine who are also entrepreneurs, and that forces us to talk. Guys are really bad at this in general, so that book club really helps us. And a lot of times we won't even talk about the book; we'll talk about business and other things. So it helps you personally grow. And then from a business perspective, um, eh, there's only one goal. I want to take most Fridays. I want to do what I want to do. So like this recording you're doing on Friday is because my Friday is always blocked. So I could do what I want to do. I can be on it, give all my energy to it, or go on a tennis tournament thing with my son if he has. So I feel like that's what I want to. I want to create a business that allows me to do that in a big way. So the spiritual, family, personal, and business is how I look at it.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing it. And this has been a wonderful conversation. So, as we wrap it up, can you let listeners know how they can reach you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah. I post a few times on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is like the best way to look at it. If you're looking into GTM, you should look at Go to Market Monday. There are 175,000 amazing people who read it. Yeah, and those are two ways.
That's great. That's great. Well, I can attest your content is fantastic. And so
Thank you.
I definitely encourage our readers to check it out. And thank you so much for this conversation. I really loved hearing so much about your experience, some of these kind of core questions executives should be asking, and kind of where go to market needs to sit in the organization. So thank you so much for the conversation.
Natalie, this was fantastic. Thank you for letting me be part of this.
Thank you. And thank you too to everyone who's listening. And if today's conversation sparked something for you, and I'm sure that it did, please pass this along to another leader in your network, because we know that these kinds of conversations really help all of us scale smarter, build stronger, and create more resilient go to market engines. So thank you again, Sangram. And this has been another wonderful conversation on Shift and Thrive. I'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.